So I think we talked about some of these things. We talked about ballot access inequity, which is basically that the Greens often face much more difficult requirements to get on the ballot than Republican or Democratic candidates. And of course, that's by design. It's, they want to make it a duopoly. They want to make it hard for us to be on the ballot. And here's some of the ways that they do that. They can crank up the number of signatures that's required for the ballot. They can have a short petitioning period, like I was saying, where you only have a few weeks to collect a huge amount of signatures. Sometimes there's huge filing fees. In Pennsylvania, one thing they do is the paper size. If you run as a Democrat, you can print out your petition for people to sign from a little home printer. Just you print it out on like a one-page regular letter size piece of paper, and you have your petition. You're ready to go. If you're an independent or a green candidate running for office, you can't just print it out on regular size paper. You have to use legal size paper. So instead of the normal 8.5 by 11 paper, you have to use 8.5 by 14. If you don't use legal size paper, it can get thrown out. All the signatures on that form won't count because you didn't use the right size paper. And, we can, of course, print it letter size, but it's something to be aware of, that you can't just print it at home on regular standard paper. You have to have a printer that supports legal size paper. You have to have legal size paper. Most of the time we just go to a copy place and print a bunch of copies and hand them out. And so, it's just a hurdle just to be annoying, right? But we can overcome it. So, but there's paper size. Sometimes filing location is a problem. So, for example, if you're running for state office, you might have to file at the state capitol. In Pennsylvania, our capital is Harrisburg, and that's like a 3-4 hour drive away from where I live in Pittsburgh. So if you want to run for state representative, you have to make sure not only that you collect the signatures, that you use the legal size paper and all that stuff, but you have to make sure that you set aside a day to drive to Harrisburg and file it, because you can only file it physical signatures on physical paper, handed in person. They won't accept faxes. They won't accept copies. And you can't just mail it to them or whatever. You have to hand it in person in their office. And this was something that actually bit us in 2020, that the Democratic Party kicked the Green presidential nominee, Howie Hawkins, off the ballot in Pennsylvania because of exactly that. One of the forms that we had to file was filed by fax machine because the government office was closed. It was closed due to the pandemic. The pandemic had started. The governor issued an order saying all public offices should be closed to the public because there's an ongoing pandemic, and all paperwork should be filed electronically. And we consulted with lawyers about it. We said, is it okay to fax in? Did we get all the paperwork in and all this stuff? And they said, yeah, it'll be fine. The Democratic Party sued in court, and the Democratic majority state Supreme Court said, oh, no, the governor's order for electronic forms, that applied to everything except elections law. You still had to file that in person. So, be aware that you might have to file in person and do the filing location. And maybe you need to make an appointment to make sure that someone's there to pick it up or whatever. So, do what you got to do, right? And speaking of, very often we get legal challenges in court. So we have to raise money for hiring lawyers and fighting it. And in many states in 2020, we actually did win in court, and we did get Green candidates on the ballot. But unfortunately, not in every state. So we have to be aware of the complications and make sure that we're doing it correctly. So these are all hurdles that make it harder to run as a Green candidate, but they're not impossible. And really, if we're trying to build a movement to win, to really make systemic change, we need to organize a mass party anyway. We need to organize a mass working class party. And if we have a mass working class party, we can knock out these requirements pretty fast. So I think the right way to think about it is not to despair over this, but to instead say, we can beat it. We have beaten it in the past. We can continue to beat it. And if we keep growing our movement, we will not only beat these requirements, but we will get in office, and we will make the changes that we need to. So because of these things, I think it's important for us to acknowledge the ballot access and equality in all of our Green campaign work. So if you're running for office, make sure you talk about fixing ballot access to make it fair for every candidate, no matter what party you are, even if you're independent or whatever. fair ballot access has to be an important part of reforming our elections, in addition to, ranked choice and proportional voting and campaign finance and all this stuff. Ballot access equality has to be an important issue. The Greens are talking about all the time.